Argentina also spoke about the debate that started about moving the seat of parliament to Tshwane. And for more on this, we're going to speak to political analyst Daniel Silke. Daniel, thank you so much for your time. I just want to start off by asking you, as you saw those images of the parliamentary precinct in flames, what was the emotion?
Well, I think it was an emotion of extreme distress, frustration, and I think just exasperation that we've seen far too many of these attacks on various institutions in South Africa, whether intentional or whether accidental. And I think, it's time for accountability. And that came into my mind. Let's hope we get to the bottom of this, to get to it in a credible way.
What's your take on the idea of getting the centers of government centralized in one place?
Well, look, this matter has been on the boil from a discussion point of view for many, many years. There has always been, I think, a push to move Parliament to Tshwane. The cost savings multiplied over any number of years are real in rand terms. And clearly, now that you have a National Assembly building that's been largely damaged and perhaps even completely dysfunctional unless it's rebuilt in large part, the cost implications become a little bit easier because you obviously have to build a new facility and you simply don't have one in Cape Town. But having said that, there's the issue of centralizing Parliament in Tshwane with the broader South African political administration. But there's also this issue of the dispersal of power, the geographical dispersion of power, which our forefathers planned for Cape Town, Pretoria, and of course Bloemfontein as well in the old days. And I think that's the battle. That's the argument really, is whether we should continue to have a separation of powers geographically across South Africa, which I tend to favor, perhaps just for emotional reasons, and I am based in Cape Town. But from a practical cost-cutting point of view, there is a very good case to be made to move the entire legislative process to Tshwane.
That dispersion of power, Daniel, is there a good reason? What would be the good reason of keeping things the way they are, of maintaining the status quo?
Well, the good reason would be that you afford the country a variety of institutions in various major centers that simply creates geographical nodes of power. You don't put everything into one city. There are other countries in the world where you've had similar debates, I might add. You've had other countries where you've moved Parliament from its historic home, like in Germany, for example, from Bonn to Berlin, and it's worked relatively well there. But I think the South African historical context delivers us perhaps additional features. We are a union of South Africa in the old sense. Cape Town is a special city, the mother city. It's historically been linked with the parliamentary precinct. And of course, Pretoria historically linked with the broader administration as well. So I think there's more of an emotional set of reasons to keep the status quo as it is. But I think, too, one has to acknowledge now that with cost-cutting measures critically important across the board, with COVID also having ravaged our national budgets, there's going to be a fresh impetus to look now at moving and centralizing to Tshwane. And I suspect there are already political players waiting to pounce on this opportunity. And for that matter, we've seen the EFF just in the course of the last 24 hours in a very controversial manner suggest that whilst the fire, almost to suggest that, the fire is the beginnings of this debate once again to move to Tshwane.
Let's talk rands and cents, Daniel. How much would it cost the government to move Parliament to Tshwane, and how much would they save in the long run? But also importantly, what kind of impact would this have on Cape Town's economy when you move over 1,000 people who work for Parliament over to Tshwane?
Well, there's a huge impact certainly on Cape Town's economy. There's about 1,500 people who work in Parliament. The numbers may be down because of cost cutting. So you'd have to uproot many of those people with all of the concomitant costs and family difficulties that has. In terms of the larger, broader cost, look, it could cost billions and billions of rands, ultimately as part of the building of a brand new parliamentary compound. Now, the question also has to be asked whether South Africa can afford to build a brand new parliamentary compound, particularly at this juncture, and whether that is a wise spend. But given the fact that we've had this damage, this physical infrastructure damage in Cape Town, a spend has to be made, whether it's in Tshwane or whether it's in Cape Town as well. the argument, of course, of moving Parliament to Tshwane is that on an annual basis, the decreasing costs of shifting your bureaucracy from Cape Town, from Johannesburg or Tshwane to Cape Town, is in the region of up to perhaps 700-800 million rand per year. So over time, you certainly do then benefit by centralizing Parliament. But I think too we have to take into account that as a result of COVID, we've all become much more Zoom compliant and virtual friendly. And that also enables cost cutting to take place. It's not necessary to move physically between the two major centers as we've done before. And I think government has been cutting costs there as well. So this requires, I think, a very major rethink by the Standing Committee on Financial Management within Parliament that have already indicated their support for a move to Tshwane, I might add. But it's not going to be easy for the city of Cape Town. It's not going to be easy for those who are employed in Parliament in Cape Town. And I think from an emotional and an historical point of view in South Africa, we should be very careful about just assuming that this move should now happen.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much. This debate will continue and it will intensify. Thank you so much for joining us, political analyst Daniel Silke. Now,